Krishna Maharaj, and then we'll have the three of you speak one after the other.
Okay.
So, Damayan Prabhu, can you start with that clip?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes.
You know, the person who was in charge of that party, Vishnu Jan, at that time, he had his 8 men, and he said, "Look, we got one bus, and there's already enough people on it." You see, the cook was a person who came to Germany for some time. What was his name? With an S.
Sadananda.
I forget, but he came after a while. A big guy, yeah. He came and spent some time in Germany. Anyway, so, Vishnu Jan said it's not possible. But the first person I made, he had about $1,000. I said, "Look, if you take this man, you get $1,000. He said, "Well, okay, we'll take one more man." And each time Krishna sent the next 3, 4 people, they all had, $1,000, $1,500. Then we went, one man we made up in Boston, he had stocks, 5 bank accounts, and he had a car, a motorcycle. And Vishnu Jan was just saying, "Wow, okay." I said, "Well, we'll just get another bus, don't worry about it. Then if we get another bus, who will lead that bus?" So then I said, "Well, we'll find someone to lead the bus." And gradually, within 1 year, we got 6 buses, 40 big vans, and 150 devotees. And almost at least 100 of them were brand new devotees. At the end of the year, we had an initiation in Chicago. Prabhupada initiated 80 new devotees. 80 new devotees, and they're all Sankirtan devotees. And our Sankirtan was so well organized. Tredas Prabhu was also a part of it. He's sitting here, right here in front row. He was also in that party. It was so well organized that every day all the men would call up their bus from the vans to give their scores of their book distribution. And 3 times a week the buses would call our central headquarters and give their scores. And I was speaking to, everyone all the time on the phone. And Prabhupada loved it. He said, "This is transcendental management." I showed him the accounts. We had perfect accounting. He said, "Transcendental account books." He was so pleased. And I asked him, they wanted to know what should be the name of the party. Should it be called BBT Party or Radha Damodar Party? And I had chosen the name Radha Damodar Party because that was the name of the deities on the bus, and Prabhupada had stated the Radha Damodar Party. Prabhupada said, "Make it Radha Damodar Party." So he liked it so much. He was so happy.
All right, so welcome everybody to this wonderful program, Vanchakalpa, through Vishya, Kripa Sindhu Vicha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo. Yeah. So we're going to start with Drishta Prabhu, and before you speak, Drishta Prabhu, let me just say something about you so that because this is being recorded for posterity, and we wanted whoever sees this to know who is speaking, give a little bit of a description of the person who's speaking. So His Grace Drishta Prabhu joined ISKCON on the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party in Portland, Oregon in 1975, when he met His Holiness Mal Krishna Goswami and His Holiness Vishnu Jan Swami, who were traveling on the Radha Damodar bus. 7 weeks later, he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in Chicago as part of one of the biggest initiations up to that time in ISKCON. After spending 3.5 years traveling on traveling Sankirtan Party, he moved to Dallas in 1979. Soon he became an ashram teacher, then academic teacher, and finally the headmaster of Kalchanji School, now TKG Academy. He married to Rudrani Mataji Prabhu, Mal Krishna Maharaj's disciple, and they have been living near the ISKCON community of New Golokadham since 1993. Currently, they are engaged in preaching to different groups of devotees and potential devotees in that area. They are also actively involved in Harinam Sankirtan every weekend. So, Drishta Prabhu, please enlighten us. Thank you very much.
Om Gana Timurandasya Ganan Ganan Shalakaya Shri Tangena Tasmai Shri Guruvay Namaha Om Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Bastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Muni Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravari Pacharni Nirvasesa Shunyavadi Prasachadish Tarni. So when I was contacted by Shaibian Mataji and asked to speak, I thought this would be a very wonderful opportunity to share with others and to remember myself about the really wonderful experience that I had, and I think most of us who were in Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party had. But I'd really like to emphasize that this is, what I say is really a glorification of Srila Goswami Maharaj, Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj, because had he and Vishnujan Maharaj not come to Portland, Oregon at that particular time, and I had seen the kirtan in the park the day after Nrsingadev's appearance day, I would not be here now, and I would not have the memories now. I wouldn't have gone on to have a Harinam Sankirtan this afternoon, just a couple hours ago. So I owe so much to Tamal Krishna Maharaj for his bold preaching and his very pure representation of Srila Prabhupada. He really delivered Srila Prabhupada to us and allowed us to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. And he knew how to reach each one of us to tap into our hidden desire to become a devotee. And for myself, it was pretty hidden. I lived in a house with a bunch of macrobiotic crazy guys, about 3 or 4 blocks from the Hawthorne Street Temple in Portland, Oregon. And I moved into to a room where a guy had just moved out to join the Hare Krishna movement. His initiating name was Rajendranath. I don't know where he is now, but I moved into the room that he gave up when he joined the Hare Krishnas. So I'd been going to the temple for a long time because it was so close, but I had no interest in enjoying anything. I never joined anything in my life. And the temple was really nice. The temple president was Dina Bandhu, who led the most incredible ecstatic kirtans. He would practically be bouncing off the walls, playing the mridanga. He was a much different body then than he is now, but his spirit was the same spirit he has now. So it was one day I went down to, I forget what park it was even, but I went to the park and I heard Vishnujan Maharaj and I was entranced. I said, wow, this is amazing. And I went back to the house and I spoke to my friend. His name was Bill. He later became Vijayananda Prabhu. Of course, he passed away last year. And Vijayananda Bill had never even once seen, he knew nothing about devotees. He knew the devotees existed, but he had never gone. I'd been going to the temple on weekends, but he had never gone. I said, we should go check out these swamis. So we went down the next day, and there was another big kirtan. I think it was Memorial Day, Monday after the Sunday feast. And he was just completely taken at the very beginning. And we both were really fascinated. And Goswami, he had his plan. His plan was stated that he would, Vishnujan would weave the web, and then he'd have his men take the new men back to meet the spider. And Goswami Maharaj was there to persuade us to become devotees. And he was very persuasive. I can only tell you that he made it sound like no matter what you do, this is just something you can do for a day or two. If you don't like it, you can just go and come back home. But basically, within a few hours, he had sold me, and really, I felt I have to do this. And so within a day, we were on a bus going to San Francisco, and that began this adventure. It was a 7-week adventure before actually 5 weeks before I met Srila Prabhupada in Denver. But when we got to San Francisco, when we were there, that Jayananda Prabhu was there, and I got to meet him, and he was another really amazing devotee, and I got a lot of good association, and Goswami was so fixed on making sure that the devotees we became attached to Krishna consciousness, so much so that at one point he told Vishnu Jan Maharaj that these guys, all they want to do is eat halva. So he told them to make so much halva that we couldn't possibly eat it. And then he said that way they'll get it out of their systems. But that was one area where he made a mistake, because we didn't get it out of our systems. We just kept eating it. And then when we got tired, we went to sleep and we woke up and started eating more of it. So later on, we went down on this first couple of weeks of being a devotee. We went to Los Angeles, and that's where my good friend Chaitanya Chandra joined. He was a surfer boy. I think his name was Sai at the time. And he got on the bus, and we then headed to Denver. And it was in Denver that I, for the first time, saw Srila Prabhupada. And it's hard for me to describe how I felt when I saw Srila Prabhupada. Him coming in through the door, surrounded by sannyasis from his morning walk. And he was so surrounded by these big men, but he stood out himself, even though he was diminutive. In fact, I was like shocked, because I thought, because when I saw his pictures and I heard his lectures and I read his books, I was thinking of a much bigger person. But Srila Prabhupada had so much power even in a small frame. And I still remember to this day how he floated through the room and then sat on the Vyasasan and gave class. So that was the first time I saw Prabhupada. And then, unbeknownst to me, Goswami Maharaj had plans for me. He was very kind to me, because I didn't have much confidence in really being a devotee. I kept thinking, well, it's going to take me a long time before I understand anything. I was totally bewildered and covered over by the modes. And we got to Chicago. He said, well, you're going to get initiated. And I thought, what? How am I going to get initiated? But he said, no, I want you to get initiated. And so by his insistence, I was initiated, and it was the best. And again, Tamal Krishna Maharaj acted as the agent of the Supreme Lord, acted as the agent of Prabhupada, because it was the most important thing that ever happened to me, because there were things that happened in the first couple of years of being a devotee that if I hadn't had that commitment to Prabhupada, I might have said, well, maybe I should do something else. But Prabhupada sent Goswami Maharaj, who had so much power that he would convince even a person of skeptical minds to take up Krishna consciousness with complete abandon. And so that's the beginning of my Krishna consciousness. We went after the Chicago initiation. I did join Brahma's bus, and 2 weeks ago Brahma was speaking. And there's a lot of stories I can tell about Brahma's bus, but I'll Haribo, oh, there. Haribo, Brahma. Haribo, Brahma. So, and there's a lot of stories I can tell, but I think that could be another segment. But this is how everything began for me. And I must say, I've had such an experience with Goswami Maharaj that I have to say that I would not be a devotee had it not been for him. It was no question. He had the Shakti to like take a doubting person and say, this is what you should be doing. And he had such conviction that I was convinced. And it was against my nature, as I said, to join anything. I always wanted to be a lone wolf, but Goswami Maharaj just tamed that aspect of my personality. And by his grace, I'm here today. So I'll stop there, and maybe somebody else will have something to say, and I can chime in later. I could tell stories about Brahma's bus. I'll tell stories.
Yes.
Well, Brahma and I had a certain relationship, and Brahma would send me out on long Sankirtan, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks at a time, with devotees, and we spent a lot of time in Texas. So I eventually got the name Cactus Drishta because I spent so much time on the road, and we were always like off some little 10,000 population town in West Texas and getting arrested by the police or bounced out of one place or another, and we would keep traveling. And then we come back, and if I didn't make my quota, Brahma and I had this little rasa. It was sort of like, if you don't make your peak, he said peak, you have to sleep under the leak. And because that's the bus leaked in the back. So I was always being threatened with the sleeping bag under the leak in the back if I didn't make my quota. And so
nobody ever slept under the leak.
No,
Nobody
ever.
I just threatened.
I know,
Nobody ever slept under the lake.
Now, I will also say no one ever slept under the leak. This was a rasa. It meant to enthuse the others, because we had this we just joked all the time. And I would be threatened with the leak, but I never got the leak. And we did, and it was just crazy. We had a lot of, sometimes I have to say that one time I was sent out to El Paso with 2 devotees. I won't name who they are. And basically I was sent to take them out because they were good book distributors, but they were crazy. And only I, with my mild manners and good organization, Brahma figured that I was the only one who could probably put up with them. And it was hard, I'll tell you, because I won't even repeat what one of them said to me. He said to me, if you weren't a devotee, I'd slug you in the face. But he was a hard person to get along with. But we spent so much time traveling, especially in Texas. And I have to remember one time we were in El Paso, and that we were preaching, doing programs in the downtown park, and we got noticed by the TV station because we were having these kirtans, but there was a regular Christian preacher they called Captain Bob or something, and Captain Bob, he just didn't like us very much, and he would say that they're of the devil. They got their idols and they worship them. And then Brahma was interviewed about Krishna, about who we were, and it was put on TV. And I remember that we didn't have any TVs, so we kind of went to one of these appliance stores, and we could watch the TV, the news on the TV through in the window. And but Brahma really defended Krishna consciousness and spoke really nicely. And in the end, the announcer, the reporter said, "So the choice is yours, Jesus Christ or Hare Krishna."
Let me break in here for a second. That show was the 700 Club with Pat Robertson.
Oh, was it?
Yes, that was the 700 Club with Pat Robertson.
Oh, you
it was
more
probably the. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. It was probably the most important Christian show of all time, at least at that time. And we went to put on a festival in El Paso in the public park, And the police kicked us out and said we needed a permit. So I went to the permit meeting. I had to go to the city council meeting to get a permit. And then we got the permit, and somehow or another, the 700 Club sent a reporter to cover our festival. And I spoke to the guy, and Drista also spoke to the guy. And then there was Captain Billy, I think it was Captain Billy. And he was over there, and he was with a sign. He said, "El Diablo, it's Diablo, it's Diablo." And he said, they got their idols and they worship them too. And then the 700 Club turned the picture to the deities. And there was Rasatala was there fanning the deities. And so it was the full screen on the 700 Club. And then Pat Robertson says, and they got my name wrong, and they called me Barambadus. Like Barabbas, who was the
Barabbas, I remember that, like Barabbas, yeah.
Yeah, it was like Barabbas, who was the thief who was crucified next to Jesus, according to the Bible. So he says, and it's Barabbas over there. And he says, then they had the pictures of the deities, like full screen for all the millions watching the 700 Club. And then they said, then they put a picture of me, and I'm like pointing my finger or something. And then they said, there's Barabbas. And he says, Hare Krishna or Jesus Christ, the choice is yours.
Yeah.
And when we saw that on TV, we went, Jai, yeah, that's right. So that's the story of the El Paso Park Festival.
There's also another funny story about El Paso, and this happened when we were there, and it was also had to do something with our preaching. But there were these people protesting bilingual education that was starting there. They're going to teach in Spanish. Of course, everybody speaks Spanish there. And so this one Christian protester, and this is true, had this poster. It said, if English is good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for me. The Bible's in English, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Middle Easterners, ancient Jewish.
I saw the movie. We saw the movie, right? They all spoke Charles.
Yeah, that was right in the movie. Yeah, Charles Heston.
It was the St. James Bible.
That's right.
Anyway, we had a good time. Brahma's bus. We made our quotas because we had a great time. Brahma was a great leader. We just have great kirtans on the Sundays. We came back for the feasts. And Brahma was always enlivening us. I was so happy I was on that bus. I have to say that.
And we were happy to have you. And if I can interject there, he said something about quotas. Goswami had us all have a quota. Each man had a quota of so many books they had to distribute, so much money they had to collect every week or every day. It was a soft quota. It wasn't like they would put you under the leak if you didn't make your quota. But he told me about quotas, and he said the idea of the quota was each man would voluntarily say how much he thought that he could collect. If it was a good day and he didn't get kicked out and it didn't get rained on, and he said, and that would be the quota, 6 days or 5 days or whatever it was. So that was the quota. So whenever we established the quota system, I found it to be a little hard at first. So I asked somebody, I think it was Janardhan, and I said, I said, what about this quota? He said, make small quotas. Then if you make small quotas, you'll always do better than your quota. So I said, wow, that's brilliant. So I wouldn't push them to give themselves a big quota, so that we would always do over our quota. And that way we were the heroes.
Brahma had it all figured out.
It wasn't just, I was completely bewildered, but I talked to people who were more slick than I was. Another thing was bookkeeping. Goswami was like a stickler that the books had to balance. Well, my books never balanced, so I was always getting chewed out about that, always getting yelled at about that. So I asked an accountant, I says, how the heck do you get a books to balance? My books never balance. He said, let me tell you something. Nobody's books ever balance. said, you have to cheat a little. Cheat a little? He says, yeah. He says, the only way you can get books to balance down to the penny is if you're a bean counter in some bank. And all you do is pass out money all day and take in money. And so you can write it down. He said, but that's not you. You're getting up in the morning, you're leading kirtans, you're taking care of the deities. You know, so many things you're doing all these days. You got the cash box. People are going into the cash box. They forget to give you receipts. Somebody says they collected so much, but they miscounted. And so naturally, you cannot balance the books perfectly. He said, so you just, if you have a little extra money on one week, you put that in an envelope. And when you don't have enough money, you put that back in an envelope, or you just make up a receipt and throw it in the box, you know, spent, miscellaneous, just to make sure everything balances out. He said, all Goswami wants to hear is the book's balance. He doesn't, you know, he knows you cannot balance them perfectly. So he wants to see that you're clever enough just to be able to show him the books every week that they're balanced. He says, otherwise, if you try to balance the books, you'll go crazy. So we did a little, you know, fudge things a little bit.
Yeah.
Welcome, Chaitanya Prabhu. Just saying welcome to you too. Thank you. Prabhu.
Haribol, Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu.
Chaitanya Chandra Ji, Haribol.
Ramadas.
Haribol.
Hari Hari.
I just wanted to offer obeisances to Brahma. I haven't seen him since God knows when. I don't even remember the last time I saw Brahma. It was, you know, in the 70s, I think. I don't even know. I don't remember.
Probably, yeah, maybe 70s, yeah.
You know,
When we went, did you go to Austin? Did you
you
go
know,
to
I
Austin?
didn't go at the time when you had the restaurant. I was in Dallas at that time, where I was up at the farm. Went to the farm in like 79, 80 to be with Shivaram Swami. And I was in St. Louis before that. So, and then in Philly before that. So I don't really remember. It's been a long time. But anyway, I just wanted to say hi.
I just want to say that you and Drista, you are the most sincere, steady devotees. Very inspirational on that bus. My hat's off to you. So Goswami used to say to me when I made my quota, my Sikh is off to you. So my Sikh is off to you.
Well, thanks for all the classes. You were like the, you would study the books and give all these amazing classes, and we would go out and distribute them, and it was a lot of fun. And if you didn't make your pick, you got to sleep by the lake, right? If you didn't make your pick, you got to sleep by the leak.
We've been just talking about that leak.
Yeah,
The leak, yeah, it's very. There's the leak in the lake. I'm confused. There's a leak in the lake. The lake was.
I think the only
The lake
person
was
who ever
the
got
pipe.
I think
Lake
Joe
was the
Tirmaya
pipe
was
that
the
went
only.
off from the sink.
I think Joe Tirmaya was the only one that ever got the lake.
Yeah, he got the lake. But the lake, there was the leak, there was the oil leak, and then there was the lake. The lake was the pipe that went out from the sink in the kitchen, and that formed a big puddle outside the bus. So if you didn't make the take, you had to sleep in the lake, and if you didn't do your peak, you had to sleep under the leak. Because we were tough as nails and hard as rocks. We did the job till 12 o'clock. And we were the Orange Berets. We used to call ourselves the Orange Berets. And I told that to Guru Kripa. Guru Kripa got mad. He said, I got the Orange Berets. I'm the one with don't you say I got the Orange Berets. I said, okay, you do. You actually do. So I conceded to Guru Kripa that he had the Orange Berets and we were the saffron.
I remember when the big books started first coming out, when we started to sell big books versus all the small books and BTGs and stuff, that I think it was Jagat Shaka one time, the first day he did like 3 big books and we're all like shocked. And then you instituted that for every big book we did, we got a Glubjaman. And I was like, yes, that was highly motivational.
That'll do it.
We used to get a lot of Glubjamans for those books. That was a lot of fun. But I was remembering the initiation that Drista and I, after the initiation, we got our names and everything. We sat down in Chicago for this huge feast, right? And after the feast, we both had an extra big plate of blueberry halva.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And then one of us remembered that the Mongol sweets were still on Radha Damodar's bus. So you and I went down there. I don't forget whose idea it was. We stole all the Mongol sweets and we crawled in the back of Drisha Krishna's pickup truck. And we ate all those sweets and we sat there and laughed for like 2 hours. We were totally high on all the prasadam, just laughing in the back of the truck. I always remember that as being like the first big feast, you know what I mean? That was
the first time we were actually at a temple, practically speaking. You know,
yeah. I remember and I didn't realize. I just wanted to say this because it's funny, basically, that during that initiation in Chicago, we're all busy and collecting and cleaning and doing whatever we were doing. And then when the initiation started, I didn't realize it until I heard the lecture tape that Prabhupada gave for that initiation. And then they called the first person up to get initiation, and that was me, Bhakta Sai. And nobody had told me anything about initiation. Tomorrow, I only joined like just after you did. I was only there for like a month. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, I think you should get initiated. But I didn't know anything. So Prabhupada says, what are the 4 rules and regulations? And I was like, I never heard it like that before. I always heard regulated principles. And I just read Nectar Devotion. There's a lot of rules in there. And I was like, oh no, I'm standing there with stage fright in front of Prabhupada, not knowing what he's talking about. Because I hadn't heard it like that before. And then Brahmananda Maharaj at the time came up and said, do you know the 4 regulative principles? I said, oh, no gambling, no intoxication, the cigarettes. He goes, he knows them, Prabhupada. Your name is Chaitanya Chandra. And I couldn't hear a word he said. I didn't understand my name, and everybody roared because we just installed 4 sets, I think, right, of Gordon's ID just before that. So anyway.
I have to say I don't remember much either, except that when I got my name, Prabhupada said, your name is Drishta Das, and he emphasized Das by saying servant of one who sees Krishna everywhere.
Oh, nice.
But do you remember Sleepy Jim?
I remember Sleepy Jim missed the initiation.
He was sleeping in the cargo bay of the bus.
I remember just the calling him and everybody calling him, and then somebody said he's sleeping on the bus, and everybody laughed. kind of. I remember that part.
Prabhupada said, they said Jim, Bhakta Jim, and then he wasn't there, and they said Bhakta Jim, and then someone said, which Jim? And then someone in the back said, Sleepy Jim. And then they said, somebody else said, where's Sleepy Jim? And then somebody said, he's sleeping. And Prabhupada said, sleeping next. So his Sleepy Jim slept through his initiation.
And he never got initiated, as far as I know.
Never got initiated. Actually, I'll tell you, we left Sleepy Jim. Sometimes I really feel bad about it. We left Sleepy Jim. Sleepy Jim had that disease, I think, where you fall asleep all the time. We didn't understand it at the time. I don't know, with necrophy or something. Maybe Tristan might know, but narcolepsy. There it is. Yeah. I think that's what he had, because he could fall asleep anywhere, and he used to sneak off and sleep in the bay of the bus. But one day I couldn't find him, and I had to be there somewhere, and we just drove the bus off, and he wasn't sleeping in his usual sleeping in the bay. He was sleeping out under a picnic table in the campground. So I saw him maybe 6 months later in Los Angeles, and I apologized to him for leaving him. But he said that he apologized to me for being so sleepy all the time. But that's the story of Sleepy Jim.
Sounds like a real Texas story. The story of Sleepy Jim.
Sleepy Jim, yeah.
This Lakshmi Nrsimhadev Prabhu, before you speak, Prabhu, just so that I can record you as well. So His Grace Lakshmi Nrsimha Prabhu has been involved with ISKCON since 1972, becoming a member after graduating from the Albright College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in English. He regularly attended the temple in New York City and in 1973 joined the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party headed by the legendary Kirtanair, His Holiness Vishnujan Swami and His Holiness Mahakrishna Goswami. Lakshmi Singha Prabhu traveled with the Radha Damodar party from 1973 to 1976. During that time, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, twice initiated him. Lakshmi Singha Prabhu's primary service to ISKCON from 1976 to 2007 was as temple president or temple director. He served in that capacity in the United States, in Manhattan, New Jersey, Brooklyn, Baltimore, Alachua, and Bhakti Center, New York City, and started a temple in Puerto Rico, which has been successfully functioning over 40 years. From 2008 to present, Lakshmi Prabhu has focused on presenting the philosophy and psychology of yoga through seminars at yoga studios in New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico area. He has extensively studied Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutras, and other yoga texts, and is known for taking these ancient sacred texts and presenting them in an easily accessible way, focusing on contemporary application. At least 12 yoga studios call upon Lakshmi Prabhu to present yoga philosophy and psychology to their yoga teachers in training. In 2009, Lakshmi Prabhu released his CD entitled, quote, Chance Encounter, close quotes, and has performed kirtan in many yoga studios, temples, and interfaith programs. He currently resides in Florida with his wife, Dr. Gulnara Daldibaeva Pugliese. I might have pronounced it wrong. Sorry if I butchered that word. Her name is Gokul Priyadevidasi Prabhu, and son, Nrsingadeva. Thank you so very much, Prabhu. Please enlighten us.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. My obeisances at the lotus feet of all the Vaishnavas present. Brahma Prabhu, I have to say I haven't seen you also in an equally long period of time, so nice to see you and hear you recant some of the famous stories that precede you. So nice to see you again, nice to be in your association again.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Last time I saw you was in Puerto Rico.
Oh yeah.
I think Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so Chaitanya Chandra, I had the benefit of his association in El Paso. He's been inviting me there to attend the wonderful functions he's involved in organizing, and I thank him. And Drishta Prabhu, old, longtime friend of mine, we regularly communicate. Always good to see you, Drishta, and hear you. And the adventures you and your wife are embarking on in terms of the Harinam Sankirtan and the programs that you hold. And to all the Vaishnava devotees that are out there, my obeisances. So I'm truly honored to be here this evening with you all to tell some of my part, little itty bitty part in the history of Radha Damodar. If it wasn't for, I can honestly say, if it wasn't for Vishnujan Swami and Radha Damodar, I don't know if I would be a devotee. I tried in the Henry Street Temple. They had this kind of newbie program. You can go there and stay for a weekend or something like that. I joined the Radha Damodar party with another devotee you all may remember. His name is Radha Raman. We were the Jersey boys, and that we're going to the Henry Street Temple, and that plays into my interaction with Goswami because he's from Manhattan, and Radha Raman and I were from Jersey, and we always had this Jersey, New York City Ross between Goswami and Radha Raman and myself. Radha Raman was a little different because Radha Raman's a very different person. But in any case, I joined the International Society for Krishna Consciousness after a year of attending programs at Henry Street Temple and going there. And like I said, we stayed, Radha Raman and I stayed one or two weekends, I believe. I remember Pancharatna, Gopijana Balaba, all the cast of characters. I believe Sunanda was there at that time. All the cast, Jayadvaita Swami, Romapad Swami, the Daivi Shakti, all the cast of characters that were there. But for me, it wasn't working. Krishna consciousness was working. The Bhagavad Gita was working. Chanting was working. Following the principles, that was all working. But sleeping in the closet wasn't working for me. So we just decided. Radha Raman and I decided, let's go to Janmashtami. We had heard there was a devotee in New York Temple. His name was Gadadhar, and he invited us to visit New Vrindavan. So we went. That was the summer of '73, I believe. We went to New Vrindavan for the Janmashtami celebration there. Ended up staying there for 2 weeks, and both Radha Raman and I, Radha Raman more than me was liked it. I didn't like it at all. I was a city boy, and I always liked concrete under my feet rather than the mud of New Vrindavan and having to chip the ice off of the pond, this muddy pond where you took your morning shower at 3 a.m. So we ended up not staying there, New Vrindavan. We did 2 weeks of seva and then traveled south because I had graduated college and I was a musician, and so was Radha Raman, and I received an invitation to go to Nashville, a musician that I had played with in New York City, kind of like the Eric Anderson, Bob Dylan days, and he was a folk singer. He invited me to go there. He relocated to Nashville. We went there, but we miscalculated. We got there on the wrong day, so we weren't able to see him for about another 3-4 days. So Radha Raman and I, both of us had been reading Prabhupada's books. I mean, that's how we came together. We actually grew up in the same town. He was a little older than me, and but we were on the same path, and both hippies, long-haired hippies, and musicians, and so we kind of reconnected, even though he was a couple of years older than me, through music, and then through music we found out we were both into Krishna consciousness, and after that we decided to travel together. So Nashville wasn't happening because we got there at the wrong date. So we looked on the BTG, figured out which was the closest temple. The closest temple happened to be Atlanta, and it was either a Saturday night or a Sunday morning. And they said, "Let's go." We had this van. Many guys had vans in those days, and we had a van and we had a dog named Titania, and my Dalmatian. We kind of brought her along. So Titania, Russell Reed, Radha Raman, myself, we headed down to Atlanta, Georgia, and we got there in time for the Sunday Feast program. Met Balavanta, loved Balavanta Prabhu, and found out that he was involved in the mayoral campaign for Atlanta at the time. So it turns out that Radha Raman and I both we knew how to drive various size vehicles, and they had a bread truck, and the devotees would go on top of the bread truck. It was a silver bread truck, and the devotees would go on the bread truck, top of the bread truck, and they would chant and throw prasadam off the truck, which was quite funny because sometimes it was fruit like bananas and apples, and sometimes the people wouldn't catch it and it would hit them in the head. But Radha Raman and I were, we had a good sense of humor, and we both drove that vehicle, so we were in charge of driving the bus, that bread truck for a couple of weeks. That's the backdrop to me meeting Vishnu Jan Swami. What happened was there were 3 sannyasis who came through while we were there. Sudam Swami, Rupanuga was still a sannyas at that time, and then the last one was Vishnu Jan Swami. So Radha Raman and I we were dead set and heading down to Key West as per our design, our plan, and to play music, to do a little Krishna consciousness. There was a vegetarian restaurant with a favorable person there to Krishna consciousness, and that's what we had planned to do. but Vishnu John Swami came along and he threw a monkey wrench into our plans, our enjoyment plans. We were doing this seva, for Balavanta, and like Drishta and Chaitanya Chandra, we also became prasadam addicts, particularly the blueberry halava and the sweet rice. Although my wife won't let me eat blueberry halva anymore because she's an Ayurvedic doctor and she strictly forbids fruit and grains together. So all I can do now is imagine the wonderful taste of blueberry halva. But anyway, Balavanta kept us stuffed with blueberry halva and sweet rice and seva and devotees association, the beautiful, I think they had Gornitai deities at that time. And then Vishnu John Swami came along. And it was a yellow school bus at that time. The Greyhound buses weren't in existence at that time. Wasn't even on the table at that time, because this time that we came into the picture in Radha Damodar, it was shortly after the roadshow broke up, and Vishnu John Swami decided to take the bus, which was, I believe, part of the roadshow, and the Radha Damodar deities, and to travel. There were, I think, around 6 brahmacharis and Vishnu John Swami. And a couple of them were really, really good book distributors. And Sri Balaba was one who was kind of like a total madman in a nice way. And he was really funny and a good book distributor. And then there was Ramacharya, who was the Pujari of the time. Actually, these deities, this picture of Radha Damodar here, you could see the mukuts probably were made by Ramacharya and some of the other paraphernalia there. So there was 6 brahmacharis, Vishnu John Swami, Radha Damodar deities, the yellow school bus at the Atlanta temple, and we were going out helping Balavanta with this campaign, this bread truck, Harinam type of campaign. And we would come back, and then Vishnu John Swami was there. We became friendly with him. He found out we were musicians. Of course, Vishnu John Swami was a very good musician, guitar player, and other instruments. And he found out we were instruments, so he immediately had the good sense to engage us in kirtan. So we started going out in Harinam Kirtan with him. Now that presented a problem. Of course, he was calculating, how do I get these guys to join? But we had Titania. Now, I had Titania for about 2 years, and she was a wild and woolly Dalmatian. And after those 2 years, she finally became settled down. And so while we were doing seva all day, she would sit by the van, and the van was parked outside the temple, and she'd wait for us to come back. So Vishnu John Swami, there was a little porch over the entrance to the Atlanta temple at the time. There was a little porch like that was there, and a little balcony, and he sat on that balcony. So Titania used to sit, and he'd look at that Dalmatian, and I'm sure he thought it was an obstacle in our devotional service. So one day, Titania was sitting there waiting, and a van full of hippies pulls up, and they get out, and they're petting the dog, and they're saying, "Wow, man, this is really a cool dog." And Vishnu John Swami yells out, he goes, "Do you like that dog?" And the hippies said, "Yeah, man, he's really, really a cool dog." So Vishnu John Swami said, "You can have the dog." He said, "I know the owners, and they want to get rid of the dog. So you can take the dog with you." And he said, "Really, really?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I know the owners. I'm sure they'd be happy you took the dog." So they took Titania, and they put her in the van, and they disappeared. I came back and was looking for the dog, and I said, Vishnu John Swami, he was still up there. I said, "Did you see where my dog went? Usually he hangs out here around my van." He said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "These hippies pulled up and they kidnapped the dog. They just grabbed the dog and put him in the van and took off." So I said, okay, all right. I guess that was Krishna's desire. And Vishnu John Swami was realizing, that was the last obstacle in terms of getting these guys to join. So he had a meeting with us, and he said, why don't you guys stay with the party for a little while and travel with us? You're musicians. We do kirtan. That's a form of music, and I'm sure you guys would really enjoy it. So, he actually spoke to me first, and so he was talking, and he was very convincing. And like Tamal Krishna Goswami, Vishnu John Swami was very, very convincing, very sweet. He sweetened you to death. And so I said, okay, so Radha Raman had a lot of auto mechanic experience. So they quickly found that out. They drafted him. And he was like under the bus, working on the bus. And so Vishnu John Swami convinced me, and I was going out to my van and to get some stuff. And Radhaman said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going with the Swami. Vishnu John Swami, he told me I should travel with him for a period of time. And Radhaman got up. He had a big wrench in his hand. He threw the wrench down. He says, you ain't going without me. You ain't going without me. I said, well, you have to speak to the Swami. And Radha Raman ran up there, and of course he traveled with us too. It was funny. Radha Raman was quite a character, and Vishnu John Swami knew exactly how to deal with him and how to engage him. So, to make a long story short, we began traveling with Radha Damodar party. At that time, their specific seva was to go to state fairs all over the country. And the first state fair, I can't remember, it was two that we did in succession. One was Memphis and the other one was Nashville, and I can't remember which one came first, but that's where we started as official members of the Radha Damodar party. I believe it was Nashville, actually, and I remember getting one of my first Radha Damodar brahmachari showers was you stood up against the bus and they hosed you down. It felt a little bit like Auschwitz, but it was cold water hosed down, and just the brahmacharis and gumshas, and that was our shower, because that's what could be arranged. And our service was we would be out all day. We set up a tent and a kirtan. We had a kirtan next to the tent, and we sold books, incense, and other paraphernalia from India. And the devotees next to the tent on a little platform would do kirtan. And we would I was a brand new devotee. I mean, a couple of weeks inside of the ISKCON bubble there. And I was preaching right away. Vishnu John Swami put me out there, and I had read Bhagavad Gita, so I knew a little bit of the philosophy. But we were out there selling incense, selling books, selling dresses, Indian dresses for ladies, which was, quite an unusual activity for a brahmachari to be putting dresses up against ladies and say, oh, this looks marvelous for you. You should buy this. But we did that. That's how we supported the party, and we traveled around. And I did that for about a year. In between, I was sent out on book distribution. Vishnu John Swami said, okay, you've been on the bus long enough. You should go out with the book distributors also. That was about after 3 or 4 weeks being on the bus, maybe a couple months. Then they sent me out with Sahotra Swami was the leader of the bus, and Riksaraj, and also Hasyagrami. So that was the crew. Riksaraj got sick. He was sent back. And another devotee came. I forget what his name was. But we traveled around, did book distribution. And we did that in various places around the United States, sleeping in the back of the van. I remember using the spare tire as my pillow, and traveling around and distributing books and incense primarily, because at that time, this was pre-Tamal Krishna Goswami days, So we not only distributed books, but we also distributed incense. And of all the distributors, Ramacharya was like by far the best incense distributor that was on the Radha Damodar party at that time. That was probably from June 73, and I remember I just went over the Radha Damodar Vilas, and Vyasaki says there that Tamal Krishna Maharaj came in June. I do not remember June as being the time that he came. I remember around Lord Nrsingadev's appearance. I want to say around May 10th is what I remember when I first met Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was joining the traveling party. My impression of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I knew a little bit of the history because Vishnu Jan Swami had briefed us on who he was and what service he had done and where he had joined, etc., etc. So I was a little bit familiar with him through Vishnu Jan Swami's eyes and friendship. And when I first met Tamal Krishna Maharaj, it was like he is the total opposite of Vishnu Jan Swami. It was hard to imagine, the two of them being really, really close friends, because Tamal Krishna Maharaj was like always hyper focused. I mean, he was like one of the first mindful people, in present day yoga circles. You have this mindfulness. I was always amazed at Tamal Krishna Goswami's mindfulness, how he was always locked into what he was, involving himself at the time, whether it's book distribution or preaching to an individual. And the other thing, I noticed that kind of intensity. And the other thing I noticed, being from New Jersey and spending a lot of time in New York City, I also noticed that he had a very sarcastic nature, kind of like what I was used to in growing up. And Radha Raman and I were both like that, because where we came from and the families that we came from, that was how people communicated in those days. So I noticed that about Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and we hit it off in a very nice way. I think the first thing I got was Tamal Krishna Maharaj sizing me up. You always got the sense that he was sizing up a person that he met for the first time, whether it was a new person or a devotee that he would have some relationship with. In my case, we were on the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party prior to him. We were part of that 8 brahmachari, 1 sannyas group that was going around and doing the program, the state fairs, the book distribution, and the harinams, etc. So I really got a sense that Tamal was sizing me up and trying to figure out where I was at. And we became fast friends, and eventually what happened was, prior to Tamal Krishna Maharaj joining, I believe, the yellow school bus had burnt down. It had some leak. Speaking about leaks, Drishta, they had a leak of some kind of fluid. I was on Sankirtan, and it was in Arizona on its way to meeting us in Houston, and it burnt down, and all the incense and Lakshmi and all. I had instruments, percussion instruments that I brought to the movement, and we had other instruments, and everything we kind of lost in the fire, with the exception of the deities and maybe some Lakshmi they were able to save. So that's how the Greyhound bus that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was admiring at the time came into play, because that yellow school bus burnt down, and Radha Raman, myself, and Doyle Chandra went to New Jersey, where we found a bus, Greyhound bus. It was does anyone remember the number of that bus? 4140, I believe it was, the model of it. It was a kind of a famous bus, because Krishna directed us to that model bus, which became like historically a great bus to have, you know, for in the history of Greyhound buses, that seemed to be a real producer. We found this bus in it was in Jersey City, New Jersey, at a wreck place, you know, vehicle wreck place, because that bus had caught on fire too, and the inside burnt out. So we bought it. Vishnu John Swami gave us the sanction to buy it, and we drove that bus to New Vrindavan, where we met Vishnu John Swami, and then eventually we took that bus down, and then that's where we met. That's how that bus came into play, that Tamal Krishna Maharaj so nice, so admired, you know, the whole concept of that Greyhound bus. I don't know how long you want me to go on, but I'll just take a check there. That's my meeting with Tamal Krishna Goswami. It was prior to the 6-bus venture that it turned out to be. And I have a lot more to say, but I want to just slow down here and you know, defer to whatever anybody wants.
Yeah, I was going to have Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu speak, and then all of you can chime in, and maybe others may want to ask you some questions or say something that's relevant to what you said. So to introduce Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu joined ISKCON on the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party in San Francisco. Says here Oregon, OR for some reason. I don't know if that's Oregon. In 1975, May, when he met His Holiness Krishna Goswami and His Holiness Vishnu Jan Swami, who were traveling on the Radha Damodar bus. 7 weeks later, he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in Chicago as part of one of the biggest initiations up to that time in ISKCON. After spending about 3 years traveling on traveling Sankirtan party, he moved to St. Louis, preaching and book distribution. Under the guidance of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, he moved to Gita Nagari, collecting funds for the Oklahoma farm in the early 80s. Then he moved to Dallas, serving as the temple commander, preaching, book distribution, and helping with the Kalachandji's restaurant when it started. In 1986, he married Her Grace Neelamadava Devidasi and is serving in Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji Dham. In 2010, he started preaching in El Paso, and with other devotees, having a steady preaching program, conducting Rath Yatra and other festivals. Welcome, Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu. Please enlighten us. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you. Yeah, well, what happened was just kind of following Lakshmi's, but I'll make it a lot shorter. One of the devotees, there was Prabhupada's cook and Prabhupada's driver. One of the original book distributors named Keshava, Karundar's brother. They grew up in the neighborhood where I was living, and he came to go visit his mother and his old friend, and I was hanging out with his old friend. So gradually, he and I met, and he asked me if I knew anything about the history and philosophy of yoga, because he saw me doing some yoga, and I said no, just stretching and breathing. So one night we spent all night. I came out of there the next morning chanting japa as a vegetarian, and so after some time, he called me to inspire me to chant 16 rounds, and I started chanting 16 rounds and reading Bhagavad Gita, and I wanted to surrender. And he was calling me. He had joined Tamal Krishna Maharaj's bus. I'm not sure where they started, but he called me from Washington State and asked me to drive up there and join them, but I had just wrecked my car and I couldn't go. And then he called me from Oregon. I'm not sure where did you join? Which college?
In Portland, Oregon.
In Oregon, okay. So right after you joined, then he called me from to come to San Francisco. So I just flew up to San Francisco to meet him there, and it was really interesting because I'd never seen devotees before. So there was this one really super thin devotee at the airport. He looked emaciated, and I was like, wow, this guy doesn't look healthy at all. I was like a young surfer, you know, I was 18 years old, you know, coming from a sports background and all that stuff. But anyway, Keshava met me in the car with a big giant plate of prasadam, and on the plate was a big gulab jamun that Brika Sangha had made. Remember Brika Sangha's gulabs?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it's so beautiful, this prasadam. And I didn't, you know, I'd never seen anything like that before. And he said, well, this particular thing, this gulab jamun, you have to eat it in a special way. I'm like, oh, really? He goes, yeah, you have to put it in your mouth all at one time. So he was just goofing with me, but I did it anyway. All this juice was coming out of my mouth, all down my face, and he was laughing. And I said, you can laugh all you want, but this is the best thing I've ever put in my mouth. I was like, anyway, so then we got to the temple, and then he brought me onto the bus to meet Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Vishnu John Swami, and Tripurari Maharaj, who was on the bus giving class at the time. And there was a devotee named Chaitanya something, I forget his name. He was there playing the madranga, sitting on the floor. I don't remember if it was Chaitanya Mangal or if it was Chaitanya something, I forget his name. But anyway, he was playing the madranga, and I was like, wow, I really love drums. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, you like those drums? And I said, yeah. He goes, you'll learn how to play. And I said, great. So, you know, we stuck around and talked to everybody, and then Keshava and I were kind of independent, so we left in the middle of the night one night to go back to my house, which is a couple 100 miles away, on a bus, and got rid of all my stuff, bought another car, shaved my head, and then went to go see Prabhupada in Los Angeles. And then we saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj there, and he was a little upset that we had disappeared on him. He said, yeah, you know, Keshav was really passionate, you know, you got to be careful and this and that. And I was like, wait, I didn't say anything. I was like, well, he's my connection. So whatever you think he is, he's my connection. So anyway, I got to stay there in LA just like 2 days before Prabhupada got there. And it was amazing. The devotees run this huge marathon, just cleaning and getting that new temple room ready, you know, for Prabhupada. All the murals had just been painted, and Jadharani called me and another bhakta to take photos for her painting of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I will also and so we got to hear about Prabhupada from, I remember, what's his name, Bhavananda Maharaj gave this one class how powerful the pure devotees were, and some young man challenged him, and he just was speaking so nicely about Prabhupada that the guy joined, he surrendered. So anyway, Prabhupada came, and I got to stay there for a few days. Then I went to San Francisco. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was going to ride with me in my new beat-up old station wagon that I had just bought. And at the last minute, for some reason, he didn't go with me, which was Krishna's arrangement. So he didn't have to be part of how it broke down 3 times on the way to San Francisco. Anyway, it was a pretty crazy journey. I had to drive with the key, because the linkage to the throttle got stuck on full, so I had to drive the car, driving with the key. So anyway, I finally got to San Francisco and joined the Bhakta program. Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu John Swami were the Bhakta leaders, and Gadadhar was there training us how to sell incense. And we used to get to go on walks every day with Vishnu John Maharaj through Golden Gate Park. That was really wonderful. And my first service was to play the tambura. Vishnu John Maharaj trained me how to play the tambura on the stage when he was singing with Radha Damodar. And of course, they're singing all these different beautiful songs, and I didn't know them, so I was just pretending to sing because I didn't know the song. I only knew the Hare Krishna mantra. But I remember particularly that wherever we were singing, I remember Brahmadas and Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Keshava, and there could have been some others, but wherever Vishnu John Maharaj is doing kirtan, those 3 would look to see who were those who were the most absorbed in the kirtan, and they would go and preach to them. And I remember, I'm not sure who, if it was Tamal Krishna Mars or whoever it was, but they brought one person back. It was, I think, in front of Ghirardelli's chocolate factory where they were set up. And they brought him back and shaved him up, and he got initiated. His name was Paramatma. I don't know if you all know him. I saw him years later somewhere. I forget where. It was Alachua maybe, but I really appreciated the amazing ability that the devotees had to go down and convince others right on the spot to become devotees and bring them back to the bus and fill them full of prasadam and preach to them. So that was my service for a couple of weeks, was to play the tambura. And book distribution wise, one day Kavi Chandra, now Maharaj, he was a Grihasta then, he trained me how to sell BTGs on the sidewalk in front of the Ghirardelli chocolate factory down by the wharf. I forget the whole layout down there, but I got picked up by the police and thrown in jail overnight, which was kind of exciting, right? The cops hated us down there, and I was the new guy, so they knew they could arrest me. But anyway, so then we went from from San Francisco to Denver and saw Prabhupada for like 5 days or something like there. Got to hear him give lectures, and then we went to Chicago. So when I got there, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, I think you should get initiated. And so I'd been a devotee for only a month there on the Radha Damodar party before I got the initiation there in San Francisco. In Chicago. And then after the initiation, we all got divided into the buses. And Sunanda, you were on Brahma's bus at that time. I remember you cooking there at that time, and we got to travel. I forget where we went first, but yeah. So it was an amazing experience. I think that, like as Brahma had pointed out, we were like the orange beret. We all felt like that we were like Lord Chaitanya's army of book distributors, and that mood of trying to fulfill Prabhupada's desire and distribute books to help engage people in devotional service through the book distribution, selling our incense and books and like that. It was a very transcendental, inspiring mood, and it was kind of all centered around prasadam in a lot of ways. So we used to always really appreciate Sunanda's amazing cooking, because as young guys, we were always highly motivated to get some kind of sweets or some kind of, something special. I remember one time on Brahma's bus, I don't remember what month it was, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj had purchased like all the BTGs from the BBT because they had been way behind, and we had like I don't know how many, 50,000. Brahma can clarify how many there was, but our bus was full of BTGs, and so we had a contest. Whoever would sell the most BTGs, we were trying to do, like, I don't know how many days it went for, but one of the days, if we distributed the most BTGs, we would get the entire Maha plate and the Mongol sweets and everything. So I was like, okay, I want that prasadam. So when I distributed like 475 BTGs that day, and then won the Maha. So to me, the whole Radha Damodar experience. And then after that, I actually started traveling with Drista. Pretty soon after that, we had a traveling party, and I was living with Drista, and we were traveling everywhere. And same mood, just hearing and chanting, going out and trying to distribute the book.
That was this was the life of just being totally absorbed. We were either, getting ready to do Sankirtan, or we're coming back from Sankirtan, and we could read the books, and we had no other engagements. So it was really, it was a great experience. And for me, it's helped me be fixed in Krishna consciousness the whole time I've been a devotee. Just to have that experience of 100% everything is service, or service of service, just being connected all the time. So those were really great times.
the reciprocation we got for doing that was, I mean, the realizations and experiences we had just, doing that, like you're saying, that for me, that was, my foundation also, being able to have those amazing experiences where distributing books to people and Krishna, arranging so many wonderful experiences like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that was like, it was like, to me, it was like living our little tiny version of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. You know what I mean? Because Lord Chaitanya, obviously, and his devotees are all powerful, pure devotees, and Prabhupada, but we also got to go out there and praying to the Lord and depending on the Lord, trying not to be the doers and trying to be connected to the super soul and trying to be empowered to distribute books in some little tiny way. Those experiences definitely. For me, it was like, okay, this is real. This is real. Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, everything is real. It's like we got to experience it right directly, ourselves out there preaching to people, distributing books. It was such a powerful, amazing experience. Even though I wasn't, I was one of the smaller, I had the lower quota, as Brahma was saying. Mine was always the lower quota. But we got to go in India to see Prabhupada in '76.
Yeah.
The whole Radha Damodar party got to like hijack, with all the rest of the devotees, a giant 747 that had never been to India before. And 747 was the first time it landed in India, and we all got to go and see Srila Prabhupada there in Mayapur and Vrindavan. He gave class every day, and so
that flight to India was notable because Vishnu John Maharaj led the Mangal Artik over the loudspeaker of the plane, and
they had to stop us from dancing on the plane because it was making the plane move too much. Remember, we were doing like Harinam.
Yeah, we would go up and take darshan of Tripurari Maharaj's deities, Chota Gaur Nitai, and. You can't even imagine doing that now. I mean, it would be impossible.
We had taken over the whole plane for sure. Remember, we all had like bags of samosas from New York that we took, and prashadam and samosas, and I always remember that. When we got off the plane, all those little kids were begging from us when we finally got to Calcutta. I think we landed in Bombay first, right?
Yeah.
And then we went to Calcutta. I remember all the little kids begging for everything that we had, and that was really amazing, going to Mayapur and being with Prabhupada in Mayapur. Kamal Krishna Maharaj, he engaged us in serving prasadam to Prabhupada's guests. I don't know if you were part of that crew, but he engaged a lot of us in, putting our chutters on properly and trained us how to serve prasadam nicely so we could serve Prabhupada's guest upstairs there, and got to guard Prabhupada's room and go to that. They had a big darshan. Remember, we all got to go in Prabhupada's room, the whole party.
Right.
I think we got $10 too. That was our.
Oh yeah, we got at one point they gave us 10 rupees.
10 rupees.
because we were becoming a problem with wanting to get stuff, so they said just give them 10 rupees.
Yeah, I got in trouble because I had, for some reason, I had a Bhagavatam and I sold it to somebody to get more money. I got in trouble for selling the Bhagavatam. I forget how it happened. In Vrindavan at Loy Bazaar, I was like, oh, it was such a fabulous festival.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing that's amazing, the kinds of things, experiences that we've had, in that period of time are just monumental. I mean, how old are we now? We're all in our 70s now, and I think it's probably as fresh as when it occurred. I mean, I tell people some of the things that we did, they just can't believe it. Case in point was the festival in the Smokies. It was called the Bluegrass Festival. I mean, when I tell that story, it's just unbelievable. Hell's Angels, Hare Krishnas, stage performance. Vishnu John Swami petitioned them to have us, because we had an esraj, which was kind of like a violin. Bluegrass, as many of you know, is mostly
Hashigrami and the Esraj.
yeah. So bluegrass is mostly banjo and guitar and fiddle. So Vishnu John Swami was trying to figure out how we could convince them. So we said we have this kind of old time fiddle, thousands of years old. They were intrigued. Little did they know when we got on the stage, number one, that we were Hare Krishnas, and number two, that we were going to do kirtan. We had all the Vishnu John Swami imports that he brought from India at the time. He brought the Esraj and the Ektar, which I still play today. I mean, if you've ever seen me do kirtan on Zoom or Facebook Live, I play the Ektar. I love it so much. But when he brought it back from India, he gave it to me. He said, learn how to play this thing. And so we were up on that stage with Esraj, Ektar, Tambura, Mridanga, harmonium, and an assortment of percussion instruments. And the audience, it was amazing. The audience, there was hundreds of people there, and they just didn't know what to do. So it just became so quiet. You could hear a pebble drop. And the security guards were the Hells Angels from Oakland, which was like one of their main chapters was there. They were the security guards. And so when we got on stage and nobody could say anything. They didn't know what to say. The organizers didn't know, because they knew, finally when we started playing, they knew this wasn't bluegrass music. And the audience were into bluegrass music, and they knew it wasn't bluegrass music. And then we started chanting. First, Vishnu John Swami started chanting one of his classic bhajans. Maybe it was Manasadeha Geha or Gopinath or something like that. That was very atmospheric. And then we ended with Hare Krishna mantra, and and got a standing ovation at the end, at the Bluegrass Festival. So I mean, who could imagine? Who could dream up such a scenario? I mean, it would take a really creative writer to dream up, such a scenario as that, and throw in the Hells Angels and the involvement that we had with them, which was fabulous. I got to distribute a Krishna book to Killer, or I think that was his name. He was the head of the Oakland chapter, and I met him because I was distributing books, and I'm so short, that I was just weaving in and out, and I ended up being right in the middle of the Hells Angels camp. And you mentioned Keshava, Chaitanya Chandra. I had always heard that Keshava and his brother Karandar were Hells Angels or bikers. And so I just said, when I got in there, I saw I was in the middle of the Hells Angels camp, and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm distributing these literatures, these spiritual literatures. And I said, even two of the Hells Angels became involved in this, became Hare Krishnas. And that, again, that was like dead silence. And these guys were monsters. I mean, I'm 5'6.5". These guys were like 6'4". They were like tight ends or defensive ends for a professional football team. They were so big and strong. And when I said that, the two of the Hells Angels became Hare Krishnas, they were like, everything stopped. And then the leader came, and he was flinging his nunchucks back and forth, so they were clicking together. And he said, what did you say? And I said, I kind of hesitatingly repeated myself. And I said, two Hells Angels became Hare Krishnas. And so he called out to this enormous guy. His name was Pigpen. His name was Pigpen. He was enormous. He was about 300-400 pounds, and he was lying in the back, taking up the whole back of a pickup truck. And he said to him, "Hey, Pigpen, did you ever hear riders with us, joining the Hare Krishna?" Pigpen said, "Nah," once. Then he said, nah, twice. And then he said, yeah, I heard some brothers got involved in something like that. So then everything toned down, and Killer took the Krishna book out of my hand. He said, what's this? And I started explaining to him about Krishna, and he bought the Krishna book for $10. Now, who could write a scenario like that? I mean, who can dream that up? And these are the kinds. I'm sure Brahma has his wonderful stories. Drishta, Sunanda, Chaitanya Chandra. We were all blessed in that way by traveling and doing the austerity of not developing any roots anywhere, and just distributing Prabhupada's books and chanting Hare Krishna and being blessed with all kinds of stories. I hope that we meditate on at the point of death about all that mercy that was bestowed upon us, and of course the immense amount of mercy to have the association of personalities like Vishnu Jan Swami and Tamal Krishna Goswami. These kinds of interactions with Vaishnavas of this caliber, I'm sure each of you can admit to the fact that it's kept you glued to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, to have that kind of association, that level of commitment and dedication to Prabhupada's mission, to have that association which has influenced us for the rest of our lives. And here we are at the end of our lives. Here we are in our 70s, and who would have thunk it?
Gaur Nityananda Bo.
Haribo.
Lakshmi.
I wanted to ask if any of those who are in the audience wanted to ask questions of you all, because sometimes devotees would like to ask questions. So please unmute yourselves and ask any question you'd like. You're welcome.
I wanted to ask a question to Lakshmi. I wanted to know, after the buses got together, after the 6 buses got on the road in Chicago, did you stay with Vishnu John's bus, or did you go on another bus?
I was the first leader of the first bus that they bought, besides Radha Damodar, the first expansion bus that came through. Vishnu John Swami asked me, and then it became apparent that it was too much for me, because we had, on that bus, we had, I want to say, at least 18 or 20 brahmacharis. So then they brought in Adi Keshava. So that bus, Adi Keshava's bus, was originally my bus. And then when Adi Keshava came into the picture, because he was TP, I believe, in Boston, when he joined the party, and so they thought Adi Keshava would do it, and I was fine with it, because it was driving me crazy, literally, because we had to fix up the bus, we had to do book distribution. I got my mother. My mother was living in Tampa at the time, in an apartment complex, and she knew the apartment complex manager, so she convinced them to let us rent an apartment and park the bus there in the apartment complex. So that my mother did some, God bless her soul, she did a lot of nice seva. But yeah, that's what happened to me. I was kind of like the second in charge of Adi Keshava's bus, and the van leaders. I was in charge of the vans, the book distribution. So that's what happened with me.
Okay.
Any audience have questions?
Somebody,
I'd like to say something about Lakshmi Nishinga. This is Mishra Bhagavan Das.
yeah.
Haribo.
I joined the Radha Damodar party when in January 15th, 1975, after reading the Back to Godhead article in the BTG that said, come join the bus. And I realized that's really what I wanted to do. It's funny how they accuse, sometimes say that Goswami and Vishnu John would steal devotees, but actually all they did was just act in Krishna consciousness and write articles, and people wanted to join. And then I got to Gainesville, and Adi Keshava picked me up in Atlanta, I was 16 at the time. And he brought me down and introduced, Vishnu John Swami was on the front porch of the Gainesville Temple with his whole band and playing his music. And then there was a big feast. I remember there was some kind of contest during the feast. And then the next day, I remember we met Tamal Krishna Goswami and we're on a walk. And you remember they were talking about age. And Tamal Krishna Goswami at the time was 29. And Adi Keshav was 21. And he just become in charge of this bus. And the bus leader had to be able to do the whole show, like what they was going on in the main bus. They had to have a bhajan party, and they had to have the colleges, and they had to have vans with book distribution. So I lived with Lakshmi Shinga and 6 other men in that van. Seemed like a real long time, even though it was only about half a year. We went all over the East Coast, and finally we got to Atlanta in 1975, and I got to see how Tamal Krishna Goswami and Prabhupada interacted. That was what was amazing. Was we drove all night and got there, and then Prabhupada came in from his morning walk and just lit up the whole room. And then he paid his obeisances. I got to hold his lotus feet for a moment. And then the whole atmosphere in Atlanta was just incredible. So then we lived, day in the life of Radha Damodar was being in on the book distribution, doing the BTGs and incense all day long. And then Goswami decided that he'd insert Krishna books, big Krishna books. You met somebody nice, you could sell him one of those. So a good day was like 50 to 100 Back to Godheads and a few Krishna books. And one day I goofed off. I slept in the Sears. One of Rusty told me that you could sleep in the department section, the furniture department at Sears, get a little rest on Sankirtan. So I came back, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and eventually I got up from Adi Keshav's bus, on Tamal Krishna Maharaj's bus, and I came back one day, and he said I had done $17.50 in about the same amount of BTGs, and Goswami says, Mr. Bhagavan, your Sankirtan results are unacceptable. You either get it up to $100 a day with 100 BTGs, or you're off the party, and you're going to have to become a temple brahmachari.
God forbid.
So we didn't want that. So I worked really hard, and then I earned a dial of bhajan. So because we had dial of bhajan, dial of sauce, I'd already had enough sauce. So I went for the bhajan. And Vishnu John Swami pulls the harmonium into the telephone booth and asked me what song I wanted to hear. And I said, well, how about that one that you wrote the tune for? Prabhupada said that it needed a tune, and you composed it. It was the Vrindavan by, on the Paramount Studio recording. So he sings the whole song for me over the phone. Vrindavan Ramaya Sthana, playing the harmonium. And then at the end, he told me the translation, and then he told me that about Nakula Brahmachari, that wherever this Brahmachari went, he would manifest Lord Chaitanya. So you should be like that Brahmachari and manifest Lord Chaitanya to whoever you meet all day. So I came out of that phone booth like really happy. And that we all worked really hard, and then the bus would go to see Prabhupada a little bit more. Not everybody got to see Prabhupada every time. They went to Los Angeles. They went to see Prabhupada in Detroit. In Denver, like Chaitanya Chandra said, we saw Prabhupada in Atlanta, and then the next time was in Chicago. We were out on the East Coast doing Sankirtan. Lakshmi Shinga seemed to know the whole area really good. And he would take us to the Brooklyn Temple on Saturday night, so we could have a Sunday feast in Brooklyn with Agni Dev and all those people. So it was a real happy life, and we did a lot of austerities, and we got a lot of nectar from it, you know. I remember we got to India in March 1976, and everybody was out on parikram. You know, all the devotees, brahmacharis were walking around with cameras on, and devotees were all like sort of like a holiday mood. But if you're a Radha Damodar man, you got sent out to the front gate at the Mayapur Chandidori Mandir to sell Gita Gans all day. That was our vacation. But I remember feeling like I feel like we're really like elite, you know, like we have this special, Tamal Krishna Maharaj has a special relationship with Prabhupada, and we get to be part of it by hanging with him. And then, and Goswami was really heavy, but he was under so much pressure by Prabhupada. Like, I found out later that in January 1976, Prabhupada decided that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was going to, on top of everything else he was doing, he should build the long building in Mayapur, and he wanted it done by Gaur Purnima. And Goswami never even told us that, but he was under that pressure. But he managed to get that building built on top of everything else he was doing. So he was Prabhupada's right-hand man, and he really believed in the perfection of Krishna consciousness was to please the spiritual master. And we all got to be part of it, so that was the really great times. I remember one time we were at the New York Temple, Adi Keshava set up the whole band with the Esaraj and the sitars and everything, and plugged it all in on the Sunday feast in Brooklyn. And then Bhavananda came down the stairs and just walks over in the middle of it and yanks the plug out of the wall. All kinds of finesse. So then that led to going to Prabhupada about the whole thing, and they said, well, Prabhupada, Vishnu John Swami taught us these other instruments. And Prabhupada said, there should just be kartals and mridungas. Who is this Vishnu John Swami anyway? Okay, our teach should be kartals and mridungas. And then we got to see Prabhupada in Chicago. There was the car was late. I remember one day in Chicago, I went out the back and I came out front, and Prabhupada sort of just walked right up to me because I was where I was standing. I got to have some nice pictures of that. And then Prabhupada says to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, because the car was late, it was caught in traffic, and Prabhupada said, so where's the car? And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he actually wasn't responsible. He wasn't the GBC or in charge of any of that, but he immediately went into action. He sent Janardhan to go get a bus, to go get a van, and then Dravinaksha to get the bus out of the way so that the van could get out. And by this time, the devotees it had gotten hot, so they put a chadar over Prabhupada's head like a tent. And finally, the man showed up and took Prabhupada away. But Prabhupada seemed to look to Tamal Krishna Maharaj as like responsible for everything, I noticed, and they had a relationship that nobody else really had. It was so special. It was something like Sarup Damodar Maharaj and Lord Chaitanya. So we had the association. Vishnu John Swami was really amazing. He could be a little heavy too. He wasn't just all strawberry halva. I mean, one time I was sitting on the bus, and I saw this beautiful pillow, so I sat down, and Vishnu John Swami comes on the bus, and I'm sitting there comfortably, and he says, "That's Jayananda's seat, rascal." Vishnu John Swami could be pretty intense. So between the two of them, it was just like the greatest association, and we did so much service, and Prabhupada was so pleased. Built Mayapur, a lot of it, and just a really wonderful experience. It was just a couple years, but I think we can all attest that it was the best days of our lives, probably, and changed and made us like a firm footing, like a lifetime commitment to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
I was
Haribo.
just I was remembering that one of our priorities, because it was, of course, with the book distribution, was the Christmas marathon, and I think for sure, I mean, the two of the programs I went to that we used to all get together and have like a pre-Christmas marathon like festival. I remember one in New Orleans and another one somewhere in Tennessee. I don't know where the other one. No, it was in Arizona.
Memphis, wasn't it?
It was I can't remember. I thought I couldn't remember where it was. It was either Memphis or Arizona or somewhere. I forget. I know the buses were built in Arizona, but I think maybe it was Tempe or somewhere. One of the years. But I remember
Yeah,
that.
Tempe. Yeah, it was definitely in Tempe one year.
But I remember the New Orleans one that we're upstairs in one of the rooms there and dancing and flying off, bouncing off the walls. And I remember Vishnu John Swami was expert at making different kinds of sweets. So he had all these different kinds of sweets, and we all had to like say how much we thought we were going to do. And based on our commitment to our quota of how much we were going to do, we'd get a particular sweet that he had made. Anybody else remember those sweets?
Malpore.
The cream-filled eclairs.
Strawberry Malpore.
Strawberry Malpore. Well,
and that famous drink, the nectar drink, the buttermilk and orange juice and strawberries.
I just made that. Did you get some of that the other day when I made it? Was it okay?
I did not because I missed it.
Sorry about that. I made some for Gorpanim there in El Paso. But yeah, I was just thinking, those occasions, it was really like a very wonderful personal way to like inspire us all to want to go out and, distribute Prabhupada's books with getting this amazing prasadam. It was just like, I think the whole concept of the Radha Damodar party and having the Sunday feast and having Glubjamin contests. I mean, on Brahma's bus, we used to have different kinds of contests. Like, I don't even remember them all, but I remember sometimes we used to roll Glubjamins with our nose across the floor and eat and see who could win. Like that, right? Remember?
Yeah, sure.
We had all kinds of interesting, fun stuff to do, for these young guys. We're all young, Prasadam Leelas, certain little Prasadam Leelas. I think that kind of motivation, that personalism and that wonderful motivation that should be promoted again, you know what I mean, to try and help people appreciate the, because it was all like in conjunction with Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and prasadam, and I think everything that we did, we always related it to Lord Chaitanya's pastimes somehow or other with prasadam, lila, and this and that. So it was really a very personal way of dealing with everybody and getting motivated to spread Krishna consciousness. It was really a sweet personal thing, personal time that we had doing all that. It was very powerful.
Do you remember the winter and summer menus?
Not really. I don't remember that.
Well, on our bus, Adikeshava had
to cook, if he remembers, because he was the one who was the cook for all that.
for a while, Adikeshava had us all living on grits, which with a lot of sugar and butter wasn't too bad. But Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he would travel to the different buses. He would somehow show up. I don't know if he flew or what, but he would just like pop up in a hotel or, he would get around. He wouldn't just stay with one bus. And when he came and found that we were doing the grits, he said that you can't feed these men. They can't live on grits. So he came up with these two menus. He had a winter menu and a summer menu. So the winter menu was this really sour cream laden sabji with cauliflowers and peas, and then halava and hot milk. That was the winter menu. And then the summer menu was the same sabji with rice. I mean, with the salad instead of halva, and the Radha Damodar nectar instead of the hot milk. So Goswami was like super organizer, and he even came up with the menu that all 140 men, 6 buses, and 20 vans was going to eat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing we all are aware of, the fact that we're kind of like the second wave. We all joined anywhere between 72 and 75, 76. And many of us, I'm speaking for myself, but I think I'm speaking for others too. Many of us didn't have an extensive amount of personal association with Srila Prabhupada. We had most of our association, those of us that are online here now, we had a lot of association with devotees that were trained by Prabhupada. I mean, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was personally trained. Prabhupada knew that he had a certain management acumen, and Prabhupada gave him personal training, which he would so mercifully pass down. I remember once he did to me what Prabhupada did to him. I was the keeper of the Lakshmi, because I was Lakshmi Nrsimha. So I was the keeper of the Lakshmi for the party, and we were in Boston, and it was some, an amazing amount of money that I used to run around with until the time that it was either put in a bank account or whatever, and thousands. And Tamal told me, he said, "Don't you ever take that money belt off." You remember the money belts we used to wear under the kurtas? So I would have that money belt stuffed with lots of Lakshmi, and Tamal told me, "Don't ever take off this money belt." And I said, "Maharaj, I have to shower, And he said, "You do not. That money belt has to stay really, really close to you." So anyway, we were rushing to go to Mangal Arti, because it was a wonderful time, Mangal Arti with all the brahmacharis and Vishnu Jan Swami and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. It was just, so I was a little late and I was rushing, and I have a tendency since youth to be a little forgetful. So I ran into the shower, I showered real quickly, got dressed real quickly, dashed out of the shower stall in Boston there to the temple room, and we had this nice kirtan. After all that, everything settled down. Tamal Krishna Maharaj calls me to the office where he had taken over the temple president's office, and he said, "Bring Lakshmi Nrsimha here." So I went to the office, and he was sitting behind the desk, and he said, "Lakshmi, I need some Lakshmi. We have to purchase some things, for the party." And I said, "Sure, Maharaj." And I instinctively went to my kurta and looked under my kurta. There was no money belt there. And I was thinking, oh my God. So he looks at me and he goes, "Lakshmi, give me the Lakshmi." And I said, "Maharaj, I must have left it in the shower. I was in such a rush. I'm sorry, I'll run and go get it." And I ran to the shower stall, and there was no money belt there. And I'm thinking, oh my God, thousands of dollars that the devotees, and I'm running around the temple asking all the devotees. Nobody knew anything. I finally have to go back to Tamal to face the music, and I walk in there. And I just had this intuition. So he said, "Where's the Lakshmi, Lakshmi?" And he, you know how intense and heavy he could get. And so he was getting heavier and heavier. And I said, "Maharaj, I know you took it. I know, I have this feeling that you took it. And that's not fair. That's not funny." So he just looked at me and he bust out laughing, and he takes it from under the desk and he throws it onto the desk. And he said, "I did that to you because Prabhupada did that to me." And he said, "Once Prabhupada did that to me, I never, ever did it again. So I'm just, sharing the mercy with you." So that was the one interaction I had with him. That was another interaction. Was everyone was speaking about how strictly he kept the books, and he would very proudly send Srila Prabhupada a weekly report of what had transpired that week in terms of book distribution and Lakshmi collected, etc. And at that time I was his secretary, and so I kept, I did whatever needed to be done, and I gave it to him. And then he, in turn, would review it, and if he had any questions, he would ask the questions, and if I had any questions about what he was asking, I would go to the party leaders, whatever. So he calls me into the bus, and he's pacing back and forth. And I don't know if you remember, sometimes when he would get a little disturbed about something, he would pace back and forth, and he was pacing back and forth. He said, "Lakshmi, where is the report? I have to send it to Prabhupada now." And I only had, like anybody else on the bus, I only had this 12-inch locker that went back about 18, 20 inches, and that's all I had. I had no attaché case or none of those things. So it was either on me with him or in that locker, nowhere else. So I went just to pacify him. I said, "Maharaj, I'm almost positive I gave you that." And so he said, "Go look in your locker." And I looked in my locker. I took everything out. Nothing was there. And I said, "Maharaj, I am almost positive I gave it to you." Now, he had a bigger locker that was up top, so you really couldn't see into it. You kind of stretched, and he would reach in and grab whatever. So he's saying, "You're saying that I have the report and I can't find it?" And I said, "Yeah. That's what I'm saying." So he reached in, he pulled out everything, and way in the back, all crumpled up, was the report. He put it in there, and then he must have slid something in there, and it crumpled it up and pushed it way in the back. And he pulled it out, and he looked at it, and he said, "Lakshmi, only you would take that from me." And that was it. That's all he said. And it was over. So he trained us because he was trained, and Prabhupada gave him a lot of mercy, and he wanted to pass that mercy on.
Yeah, like when we went into Atlanta, we got to be introduced personally to Prabhupada by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. That was one of the benefits. And when Goswami went up the stairs bringing us into Prabhupada's room, then the secretary, whoever it was at the time, said, "You can't just come in like that." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj just gave him a look like, "When are you going to get out of the way?" And then he just marched us all in there and introduced me. He said, "This is Dr. Michael. He joined our party at a young age." And Prabhupada looked at me and said, "Oh, very nice." And then we all scrunched in there after offering a flower and getting a name mentioned. And then Prabhupada said how much he appreciated us. He said, "I'm always thinking of you boys in the vans." And we were all really touched by that. And then he said that, "I appreciate you distributing my books." He said, "You should stay brahmachari if you can. It'll save you a lot of trouble." He didn't really order us that we had to, but he said it would save a lot of trouble if you were like my spiritual master. He went from brahmachari to
That was in LA?
That was in Atlanta, February 1975.
Yeah, that was Atlanta. Do you remember what he said after that, Mr. Bhagwan?
Where he said that you have a good leader with Tamal Krishna Goswami. If you serve him, then I'll be pleased. You just follow him. I remember that's one thing he said.
Well, another thing he said, it really struck me, because you said that you best to remain brahmachari. You have your arm as your pillow, your chadar as your blanket, the floor as your bed. Life is so simple. It can be solely and wholly dedicated to serving, and everybody was just like kind of pumped up. But he said, "But you must be honest brahmachari." And he said, "If you can't be honest brahmachari, then become honest grihasta." And to me, I was like, it was such a revelation, because Prabhupada really, he was concerned about us, and probably he knew that most of us would not stay brahmachari. So he wanted to remind us that one of the most important qualities of development in Krishna consciousness is to be honest. So he said, so that's what he said, "But you must be honest brahmachari. And if you can't be honest brahmachari, then become honest grihasta." And I remember that, that statement. That's one of those Prabhupada statements that you heard with your own ears and you don't forget.
And then Prabhupada said that you're all Vaikuntha men.
Mm. Yeah. Was everybody there in Atlanta? Brahma Prabhu and Chaitanya Chandra and Drishta, were you all there in Atlanta?
I came later.
I came later. Yeah.
Brahma, were you there?
It was in March, right?
I'm not sure. February, maybe
Yeah,
February.
It was just before I joined.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So that was 75, right? March,
Yeah.
February of 75?
They just taken the four buses, took a picture in Fort Lauderdale, right not too long before they got to the Atlanta. And then when we got in Chicago by July, there was now it increased to 6 buses and about 3 times as many men.
So that the bus photo that I remember was when we were in Chicago. All the initiates, the whole Radha Damodar buses pulled over and Prabhupada sat in front and
Yeah.
Right.
took
Yeah.
that photo there. But I don't remember how many buses there were. I think there's only 4 buses in that photo.
There are 4 in the picture.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that happened that was pretty amazing, Tamal, Krishna Maharaj wanted to give Prabhupada, a donation from the party, and he fixed the figure out, I think it was $100,000. And so, Tamal had a way of presenting things when he was, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees want to give you this donation, and they've worked extra hard, to get in. It was my recollection was $100,000, and Tamal had arranged it that it was in a big stack of bills. Now, my memory is, of course, a little foggy at this point, but I seem to remember there were $1,000 bills rather than $100 bills because the stack was manageable. And Tamal gave Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada accepted it, and he was very happy. And so, Prabhupada would just say one little thing. He would just, one little response. So he looked up at Tamal and he said, 100,000? And Prabhupada had taken the bills and he was like playing with them, and he kind of flicked them like that. And after he said that, he said 100,000? And what had happened was Tamal discovered that he was short. And at the last minute, he had someone run to the bank, and that person in the last minute had the one bill that he was short, and he gave it to Tamal. And Tamal, of course, in the frenzy going to Sri Prabhupada, he just stuck it in his pocket, and he forgot to put it in the stack. So when he gave Prabhupada that stack, and Prabhupada was playing around, and he kind of flicked all the bills, and then he looked at Tamal. And he just very, casually, and just said 100,000. And then Tamal got this look on his face, and he remembered that there was one bill short, and he took out the bill and gave it to Prabhupada. And devotees got a nice chuckle out of that one, that little interaction between Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. 100,000?
I wanted to ask Brahma something. Because at the time when I joined, 75, 76, 77, we're all doing so much book distribution. Did the Radha Damodar party ever come in first in America for distributing books? And I know we're always fighting like a lot of competition with LA and.
I think that what happened is shortly after I joined, Radha Damodar buses, they merged with the BBT party.
Oh.
with Tripurari Maharaj's party, and they were pretty much in competition for first for the next few years.
Mm.
I don't know if they were always first, but sometimes they were first. It was between that, the Los Angeles temple and the New York temple, some other temples. But because of the airport party, I don't think Tamal Krishna Maharaj liked being second or third. So he wanted to be in competition for first all the time. And so when he saw the opportunity, then he merged with the BBT book distribution party, and he was first almost always. In our case, we were always in competition with the other buses,
Right.
particularly the first year, Adi Keshava Maharaj's bus, or Adi Keshava Das. I think he was Das then.
Yeah.
Prabhupada called him, or not Prabhupada, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj called him the boy genius because he was so young and he was able to first be a temple president and then manage a bus. And then he became the president of this New York skyscraper. And so we were in competition with him a lot. And one time I complained to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I said, in the other buses, you have you and Vishnu John, Drista Jumna's got Sudama, Guru Das has so many, Jayananda, and I'm just out here by myself. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, if I gave you someone that would slow you down, that's what he said. He says, you have your own style and you're doing great. And if I gave you something, he said, if I gave you some sannyasi to travel with, then you'd have to defer to him. Then he would complain about, he wouldn't like the way you did things. So then he would complain to me, and then we'd have to make changes and everything would be upset. Right now, you're doing great. I'm not going to send you anybody. And, that's why we never had anybody. It was just us.
Yeah, they would do those calls, Keshava Bharati and Drishtadumya and Yogesh Chandra. Each van leader, I was a van leader at the time with five or six other brahmacharis, Pushpa Gopal, Bashu Gopal, and a couple other devotees. Mishra was with me for a while. And we'd have to do those calls, and report. So we were coming in second. Our van was coming in second. And so Keshava Bharati and Yogesh Chandra were getting on my case. And they told me, they said that Tamal wants you to come in first. He said, you guys have the ability to come in first. But what we were doing is we were having a very regulated program. Morning, very regulated with nice prasadam, going out 8-9 hours, and then coming back and having an evening program in Gita and prasadam, nice prasadam. So I told them, I said, I think the reason that we're doing so well is because we have this regulation, and I'm not prepared to give up that regulation. And they said, no, you got to. Forget about the evening program, stay out longer, and become first. And they said, if you don't, we're going to report this to Goswami. And I said, okay, sorry, Charlie. And I hung up. Next time Tamal said to me, he said, boy, that was gutsy. And he hung up on the guys that were getting on your case. And I said, well, yeah, it's just the regulation that we were having, I believe, was the key to whatever success we were experiencing. And he was fine with it, He was always super intelligent. I mean, the one thing it says here, some of the questions, is anything that really struck you about Vishnu John Swami and Tamal Krishna Maharaj? He was a devotee that I had experience with that was super intelligent and knew how to engage it in Krishna's service. And he would think managerially many steps ahead of anybody else that I dealt with. He always had it unfolded in his mind how things were going to proceed. And that used to amaze me always. I mean, Vishnu John Swami was very sweet and very dedicated to the deities and to Kirtan. Tamal, what always impressed me was his sharp intelligence and how he was able to use that sharp intelligence to help Prabhupada's mission, help push on that mission, in terms of book distribution and devotee making and pretty much anything that he put his intelligence towards.
Yeah, he was a great motivator.
Yeah.
He could motivate people just to get them to work beyond whatever they thought they could do.
Yeah.
It was amazing to watch him make devotees. Like he would, when Vishnu John Swami would be doing the kirtan, Goswami would scan the crowd. And if he saw somebody that was looked like they were interested, then he would go and meet them. He'd bring a Back to Godhead with him and usually distribute the Back to Godhead. One time I was in Western clothes. I was sitting close. They were letting us watch the festival before going on book distribution one day. So I remember I was unnoticed. I was sitting behind Tamal Krishna Maharaj when he was talking to these two college men. And after we got done talking to them for about 10 minutes, then he went away. And then one of them said to the other, "That's the most intelligent presentation of their philosophy I've ever heard."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Drista,
I was going to ask Drista, how did he become a devotee? Because he became a devotee at the university with one of the programs. How did you become a devotee?
Well, I mentioned that before you got on.
Oh, sorry.
I was living in Portland, and I'd been going to the temple, and there was no way I was going to become a devotee. I just didn't want to join anything. But I think we talk about Tamal Krishna Maharaj's management, but it's his command of the philosophy and his command of understanding Krishna consciousness, which really was, for me anyway, convinced me that Krishna consciousness was something that was absolutely vital.
Yeah, it was compelling.
He's compelling. No one could preach like him. And we saw that in Dallas, Chaitanya Prabhu, when he would have these dinners, lunches with these scholars. And, he was remarkable. I remember sitting one particular rabbi he kind of was just talking and talking and talking and talking. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was kind of it was like Lord Chaitanya with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya miniature. But this guy was talking for like 45 minutes or an hour, and finally, maybe not that long, but it was a long time. And finally, he paused, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "Are you done now?" And then he just launched in just a precise, precision bombing of the guy's talk, and it was done in such a way which he appreciated it. And in fact, this particular person was a rabbi. He started coming to Kala Chandi's restaurant because he kind of appreciated it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing the thing that I learned from him, and I attribute a lot of, my primary interest now is to meet very, very new people. People who have some spiritual inclination but would never go to a temple. But a lot of the things that I learned from him because he knew the arguments. He knew what people were going to say. He studied human nature, and particularly when he was doing the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan thing with Vishnu John Swami, he knew what excuses, objections, whatever the young men were going to have. And he had already thoughtfully, crafted responses that were irrefutable. And I'm sure I didn't get to associate with him when he was in Dallas and doing his PhD and all that, but I'm sure he just used the same kind of laser sharp intelligence, to understand and pick apart any objections or philosophies that he had to deal with. He just had that ability. Vishnu John had this kind of flow about him. You know, he also had a very nice command of the philosophy. But yeah, I studied a little bit communications, and one of the most important components of communication, you have tone of voice, content, and body language. And the one person who was neuro-linguistic program said tone of voice was most important. And Vishnu John Swami just had that tone of voice that lulled people into a Krishna conscious, you know, fantasy or dream state that they couldn't get out of, they couldn't shake. Tamal was just like you would say something, some objection or some observation, and he just knew, you know, what you were saying and how to pick it apart and present the counterpoint to your objection or your excuse for not joining, etc. I learned a lot by listening to him, you know, do those presentations.
One time I told Kamal Krishna that I didn't want to do book distribution because it was against my nature. And I tried to quote Bhagavad Gita by saying that Krishna says you shouldn't do anything. It's, you know, what's the use of acting against your nature? What will suppression allow? And then Goswami said that, well, what you think is your nature is actually just the modes of material nature, creating a false ego where you think that you're this body, and under the material nature, your real nature is that you're a servant of Krishna and that you do whatever Krishna wants you to do. That's your real nature. So what you think is your nature is just simply the modes in nature acting on you. But the soul is always just ready to do whatever Krishna wants.
I have another question for Brahma. When I first joined, I can't remember this exact timing, but I traveled with Manya. Remember Manya Das?
Right, Munya.
And
It was
he
a
was
PR
like
guy.
yeah, I bumped into him in Canada a few years ago for the first time since 1975. But I mean, I was traveling with him, you know, collecting money, selling incense, and he was one of the ones that was setting up the engagements at the universities. But I was just wondering, because I don't remember exactly what, because I know you all did that. You did that too, right? You had you and Hashigami or whatever. You all went to the different universities. How often did you do the university programs? Because we were out distributing books a lot of the times and we weren't there. Was that like a regular weekly thing you guys did too?
I think it was weekly, or it didn't happen every week because you couldn't get bookings all the time.
Right.
So, but we tried to do we did a lot of festivals. We had some really good festivals. I'm sure you went to some.
You made some devotees also, I remember.
You know, to be quite honest, most of the people who joined Radha Damodar party came from the temples. That's why the temple presidents got so upset with us. It's because people who had been what we used to call fringies, people who had been on the fringe, who were thinking about joining, kind of wanted to join. They when the bus came through and it was so dynamic, that inspired them to join, and then they'd be taken away by the bus. And the temple president who'd been talking to him for 2 years, they just were left behind. So that was one of the things that got people upset. I mean, out on the road, brand new people. I was out on the road for 3 years, brand new people. I think I can remember 3 people. I think 3 people who joined just because they had met us at the bus, you know.
Right.
They weren't involved with the temples. But we did a lot of festivals, especially the first year. We did so many colleges, University of Kentucky, and we did a lot of some universities and colleges in Texas. I remember we did a black college as well. And but after the first year, the bookings started to dry up because when Manya booked festivals, they didn't tell them we were the Hare Krishnas.
Oh.
You know, they told them that we were Indian Cultural Fair. with food and music and philosophy. So when the Hare Krishnas showed up, they didn't, a lot of times they were disappointed. Some places paid us to come, and then they gave us the money but told us to go. That's actually happened a few times. We showed up after a couple of days doing the festival. Christian groups on campus, particularly in the South, they would have an uproar. I remember we did a festival in a cafeteria. I remember twice festivals in a cafeteria, and both times, it was all set up to give music to the students who were eating and talk and discussions. And both of those, we were cut short because of the complaints from the Christians in the audience. In one case, we were just put outside at a remote corner of the campus where they said, you can come and visit them, see the Hare Krishnas over there, see the Indian group over there. But we did a lot of festivals that first year and fairs as well. And then after the bookings started drying up, it was very difficult to get college festivals anywhere. We did some great festivals in Bloomington. Sunanda will remember that. But we did the Mormon College in Utah, Brigham Young.
Wow.
So, and then of course we had the satellite vans, the Driscoll's van and others, but they would come in and come to the festivals on occasion. So that first year was very busy with festivals, and then the second year gradually it faded out. And then we started to do preaching centers.
Right,
the Memphis
right.
Preaching Center and the El Paso Preaching Center, which I hear that you're at now.
Well, I was
had-
there at that. I was there then in '76 and in '77, and we had a house on the corner somewhere. I remember Perladanando was there, and I forget who else was there, but
Yeah, and the roof blew off. You
Really?
may not remember, but the roof blew off. There was a big windstorm and the roof blew off the house. It wasn't the
Lots of
entire roof, but all the shingles off the house.
yeah, I remember.
So
the
we had to
shingles
leave.
all that.
But we were in El Paso. We had a lot of fun in El Paso. We used to call it El Tapaso. Instead of like Tapasha, we called it El Tapaso. And Oklahoma, that was more or less my zone in the end. In the end, it was Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. They kind of put us in a zone, and that's where we worked out of. So I don't know, that's the situation. We only had a PR guy for the first year, and that was Munyan Yu. Munyan was a lovely man.
Oh yeah, I was wonderful. I was at the Vancouver Rath Yatra like 8 years ago or something, and all of a sudden I see money, and I'm like, wow. So
Yeah,
we
he said
talked
he had to
a
go home
while.
because his wife was getting lonely. He was too long on the road, but he did a good job. He booked us into a lot of places.
Nice, nice. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was. We just got done having Indraduna Swami came to El Paso because he had been in Vrindavan the last 2 years, and so one of his disciples, a new disciple who lives in El Paso, who owns some hotels there, he converted this hotel into a wonderful festival, and it really reminded me of Vishnu John Swami a lot, because Indraduna Swami loves to sing on the harmonium, and he's got Butta Hari there with him, and he's got some other instrumentalists there with him, and it really reminded me of Vishnu John Swami and the whole mood of like just doing beautiful kirtan and preaching, and it was a really sweet festival there in El Paso. Anyway, it reminded me of Vishnu John Swami and y'all doing the festivals at the universities and stuff, and how
That was
powerful.
Maharaj's idea, was that all the buses would do festivals. The new men would be at the festival and they would go to the festival. And then the older devotees, or the more senior devotees, like people who had been there 6 months or a year, they would go out on the vans and do book distribution. So that's how the party was set up. And it had some independent vans going out at first, but the independent vans, they didn't last too long, and they eventually hooked them up with buses. Like Ganapati was in our case. Ganapati was an independent van, and he came and he hooked up with our bus. He became a satellite of our bus. So that's how that system worked.
I think as the book distribution ramped up, the emphasis, that was a little bit of the cause of Vishnu John Swami's despondency, because it started changing towards the end of the Radha Damodar. The emphasis became more and more on book distribution and the competition and all that. And I think a lot of the buses, not the main Radha Damodar bus with Vishnu John Swami, but a lot of the buses pulled back on the Harinam, that, and just kind of sent most everybody on the satellite vans that Brahma's talking about to do book distribution. And like when you get into like 75, and then after that, I think a lot of the programs, the college campus programs and state fairs or whatever was the venue of the time, dwindled.
Yeah, they dwindled. But I had Hasigrami on the van, and he knew how to book the state fairs. He had done so for Vishnu John. So we kept on doing state fairs for quite a while. But 76, I think, Mayapur. By that time, the temple presidents were so upset with us because we were running away with all the brahmacharis. I mean, on one hand, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to Prabhupada, the brahmacharis want to go with the sannyasis and preach. And then Prabhupada said they should go. And then the temple president said to Prabhupada, but Prabhupada, if the brahmacharis leave the temples, they won't be able to maintain the temples because they maintain the temples. Then Prabhupada said, well, how can they go? So Prabhupada said, on one hand, they go, and on the other hand, he said, well, then how can they go? So by that time, the temple presidents were so upset that all the brahmacharis wanted to run away and join the Radha Damodar party that Prabhupada had to make some changes, and that's what he did in 76. And then we became satellites of the New York temple.
Right. Yeah, that's where I was sent. I was sent to New York. I was the Sankirtan leader there first, and then temple president. But yeah, we were all after that. I remember after the Mayapur festival and that big controversy about Radha Damodar's tactics in getting devotees out of the temples, because Adi Keshava came. He was the temple president in Boston. Tredas was there. Hemanga, I remember Hemanga in Dallas. He wanted to join the party, and he approached. It was either Tamal or Vishnu John Swami. And they said, "We can't take you, but if we see you hitchhiking on the road, we're not going to pass you by." So and that's what happened. Hemanga found out when the bus was leaving the route, and he went up ahead a mile or two, and bus was coming, and he stuck out his thumb and opened the doors. And so, temples were losing brahmacharis like that.
Yeah, they didn't want.
Well, really cool.
In the beginning, they wanted the buses to come to enliven the devotees, and in the end, they didn't want the buses anywhere near them.
Right.
So, and I think Vishnu John left in 76. At the 76.
He never came back from.
Yeah, he never came. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the room with Tamal Krishna. It was myself, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Vishnu John, and Dristaduna. We were staying in the same room in Mayapur. And then Vishnu John just left, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj said he probably went to Calcutta to get away from the politics, because the politics were so heavy then about the party, and and then he just didn't come back. And they moved in into his. Tamal Krishna moved me into Vishnu John's bed, and then they brought in somebody else, maybe Adi Keshava Maharaj, into the room.
Yeah, because he took sannyas there.
Yeah, Vishnu John was despondent at that time, and it was pretty bad. The atmosphere was pretty bad there. because of the
Well,
situation.
it culminated into Prabhupada sending him to China.
Right.
And then that morning, after Prabhupada sent him to China, the morning walk started. And I got onto the morning walk. I managed to slip on it, and I put chudder over my head. And we went up on the roof of the Lotus building, and Prabhupada was facing the whole crowd, the GBCs, sannyasis, you know, the ones who went on the morning walk. And he stretched out his arms and was walking backwards with his cane and his bead bag out, with his arms open, and he said, "You'll all be happy to know that Tamal is going to China."
Wow.
Well,
There was kind of like a hushed jai, you know, it was sort of like the clapping at a golf tournament. It was sort of like we didn't really, we wanted something to happen, but, you know, exile to China, that seemed like so heavy. But really, Prabhupada was making the arrangement for the whole China's yatra that later came about.
but Tamal was back in charge within a few months.
Well, he went and had a meeting with us and told us the new administration. Remember that on the second floor? He said, "I used to tell you that you can't get proper training in Krishna consciousness in a temple because the grihastas are running it, but I'm not telling you that anymore. Actually, many of our devotees joined in the temples. The temples are good, and things are going to be changed a little bit." He told us how he was sent to China, and then Adhikesha was going to be head of the party, and rearranged everything, and it brought us all up to the second floor and told us all the news.
I think those kirtans, when we were there in '76 with Prabhupada and all the devotees there for the Radha Damodar party, I think those kirtans in Mayapur with Prabhupada were the best kirtans I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah.
I think the spiritual potency of Prabhupada just being there and all the devotees from everywhere around the world being there, I think that was the most amazing time of my life, being there in Mayapur, Vrindavan in '76.
I still have clear images of Prabhupada circumambulating and ringing the bell, and all the devotees following. Jai Radha. There's pictures of that, and that was just amazing. You know, you could see the absolute joy that Prabhupada was experiencing. All these, here he was in Mayapur, you know, amidst all the other Gaudiya Math temples with all his dancing white elephants, you know, hundreds and hundreds. I mean, I think Radha Damodar party alone had 80 or 90 devotees there that year, that '76. But Prabhupada was ever instructive, because when the kirtans started getting out of hand, you know, he had Guru Kripa and his party, and Guru Kripa and Madhavisa, and they started getting pretty physical, almost like a rugby match or something like that. And some devotees complained, and Prabhupada, you know, he told us, you know, tone it down.
Isn't that the year we had the kirtan contest with all the different temples, where everybody would go on the stage there on the other side, and they were like Guru Kripa's group and the LA group and San Diego, and all the different temples had their kirtan group. And I think later on Prabhupada stopped it, but it went on for like a day or something like that. All these different kirtan groups were kind of being judged by how much everybody danced or something in their kirtans. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I remember the Radha Damodar party had theirs, and I was up there, and Guru Kripa's was there in LA.
I do remember the Chicago kirtan group at that time was this like highly orchestrated presentation, and Prabhupada stopped it, and it was in Vrindavan. We were in Vrindavan, and they were doing Guru Puja, and they all would get around with the kartals, and Unama Shloka was on the mic, and they started, doing this thing, and Prabhupada said, "Stop. Nitai Chand, you lead." And Nitai Chand grabbed the mridanga and he started leading, because Prabhupada liked Nitai Chand's kirtan. So, we were over brimming with enthusiasm too, but always there was a point. There are instances in my recollection, which I always remember. There is a line, I was leading kirtan for Prabhupada. I was invited prior to Prabhupada's departure. It was 2 weeks prior to his departure, and Bhavananda said, "I'm having kirtan constantly in Prabhupada's room. Do you want to lead kirtan?" And I said, "Yeah, who else will be there?" He said, "No, it's just you and Prabhupada." He said, "I'll be coming in and out, but from 12 midnight to 3 a.m. in the morning, do you want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, are you crazy? Of course I want to do it." So he said, you're just going to get a little pair of kartals and play really, really soft, because, Prabhupada is going in and out of sleep. It was, like I said, maybe 2 weeks prior to his departure, around the beginning of November. And so, at that time, ISKCON went through different songs that became popular. So I was just nervous. It was just me and Prabhupada in the room. The room was very dim, and I was sitting in the corner, and Prabhupada was lying in bed. And I was chanting, and I was singing Hare Krishna, because I was just trying to be real safe. And I don't know what possessed me, but then this, you remember when Brahma Boli, Chaturmukhe, Krishna Krishna Hari Hari became popular? For some reason, I guess due to the influence of the trend, I started singing that. And I thought Prabhupada was sound asleep. His hand went up immediately. I didn't get, maybe I finished one line of that mantra, and Prabhupada's hand went up like that.
Oh, he didn't like it.
Didn't like it. He literally sucked the air out of the room with that gesture. He did not like it. His hand went up like that. And I saw it because I was close to him, kind of behind him, but close. And I saw that hand go up, and I knew what I had done. I knew I made a big mistake. And I just immediately went back into Hare. And that was it. I didn't change. So, we were enthusiastic. We were young. Prabhupada loved the youth and the energy and the enthusiasm. But there was lines that we crossed at times. And I remember, a few instances, especially with kirtan, where Prabhupada made it clear that we had crossed the line, either rough house dancing, or in my case, singing that melody, and Prabhupada just wanted to hear the Mahamantra.
He stopped the dancing of Sudama. Do you remember the dancing of Sudama when he stopped?
Oh, very much so, because Sudama was
a dancer.
He was in New York for a while.
And Prabhupada, and it was dancing in front of Prabhupada in Mayapur, spinning and making all kinds of, very interesting moves. Prabhupada didn't like it, because it was all about his dance. He wanted to show off his dancing, I guess. So in any case, Prabhupada didn't like it. He wanted something a little more traditional. But he did stop that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's another instance of Riksharaj in Vrindavan. Riksharaj left Radha Damodar party to go get trained classically in Indian music in India, because he played guitar. So he went for sitar and vocals. And he was in the temple room, and he was singing this raga and, doing the... I mean, I don't want to get off, when devotees, even nowadays, some of our youth, they're doing those. And Riksharaj was doing that, and Prabhupada said, "Who is that demon in the temple room? Tell him to stop that immediately." I'm not clear if he used the word demon, but it was a heavy reprimand for sure. And Prabhupada did say, "Stop it immediately." So there were lines that we did cross, and Prabhupada, etched them, and some people say no, it can't be etched in stone. But I do believe when it comes to kirtan and dancing, there were some things that Prabhupada was abundantly clear about.
I think that there may be a difference between, let's say, performing Sankirtan and kirtan in the temples. Prabhupada said in the temples it should be mridanga and kartal. Out on the street, maybe it could be a little more elaborate, and in festivals and so forth. At least he allowed us to be more elaborate. But in general, I agree with you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu's, I had told our hosts that we do this for 90 minutes, so we run a little over. We're going to continue on the 3rd of April at 10 o'clock in the morning. Just so you know, because this is going to be a whole series. We're going to keep doing this over and over again until we've had everybody speak and say as much as they'd like to, because we'd like this recorded. This is such an important part of history. What you have all done is just amazing. I think all of us have to agree this is the most prolific movement that ever got started on this planet. And Prabhupada mentioned that, and all of you are really great testimony for that. But, our host has reminded me you said 90 minutes, and now you've gone well over. And so we can speak for a little while more, but I'm just letting you know that we're sort of a little running against our time limit.
Well, I think it's a good time to end. I think,
That's great.
we were able to say a lot in a short time. I thank the hosts for their kindness and invitation. I personally greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate having the association of my dear godbrothers, who warriors on the front line for many years and continue to be so. My heartfelt gratitude to the organizers and to my godbrothers and godsisters here and around the world for the mercy of your association.
Yeah, and from the point of view of the organizers, I want you to say this is priceless for us all. This is really priceless. Thank you all so very much. We can never repay the debt we owe you for this wonderful katha of our history and just a momentous history of this beginnings of this Hare Krishna movement, the amazing movement of Hare Krishna. So thank you all so very much. Vinny, if you'd like to say anything more, please do. Otherwise, we'll.
May I speak?
I will.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
I just wanted to add something, because there's so much affection that I feel coming from all of you devotees, particularly towards Vishnu John and Tamal Krishna Goswami and what they were able to do, and etc. I can attest that he once told me somewhere around in the mid 90s that up until a year or so ago, he still held hope that Vishnu John would return.
Oh, wow.
He honestly never wanted to accept that he did something as drastic as leave the planet. And he was always wishing that he could come back. And he would talk to people sometimes, ask if they've ever heard anything about Vishnu John since that time. But it was something that was very, very difficult for him to come to some acceptance of. But thank you for all your remembrances and etc. I mean, I joined in '78 when the entire Houston temple was comprised of the Radha Damodar brahmacharis, and it was a wild ride then, even though they were living in buildings. So, but thank you again so much, each and every one of you, and please try to figure out a way that we could do this more often as we go through the years or so. Otherwise, it's going to be forgotten.
Right.
And remember, we're a dying breed.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really wonderful if we could all, if everybody would be able to even write a small memoir about whatever inspired them, to be devotees, and
Yes.
certain things about the Radha Dam. There's so many amazing stories. I think that we didn't even scratch the surface on stories tonight, just a couple. But I was thinking that if we could all do some kind of memoir about whatever, this or whatever kind of connection we had with Krishna consciousness or Sankirtan stories or this or that. There's so many amazing inner pastimes that happen within this whole thing with all the devotees.
I think
nice if we could all write it
Sankirtan
down.
story. Sorry, Prabhu.
Huh? What'd you say?
I think that Sankirtan stories would be a great topic. Just
Oh, totally.
just amazing Sankirtan stories.
Totally. You remember, I'm going to throw one in real quick. Gopalacharya was a Sankirtan band leader, and he dropped everybody off, distributed books, stopped to count his Lakshmi and book scores, and some guy put a gun on his head in the van. There's a parking lot somewhere, somebody put a gun on his head. And he said, "Give me your money." And Gopalacharya thought, I've been all day selling Prabhupada's books, and this is Prabhupada's money. I'm not going to give it to him. So he closed his eyes, and he started to sing the Nrsingadev prayers, and nothing happened. So when he got to the Tavakara Kamala, he decided to open his eyes. And he looked, and the guy was on the ground, on his knees with the pistol, crying, saying, "I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry. You've got God with you. I am so sorry. Please forgive me." And Gopal was just looking at the guy on the ground, and then he gave him a book.
Wonderful.
Hey, that's a great way to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the right way.
Right. Manta kalpatarubhasya kripasya.
Vanchakalpatrubhastya Kripasinubhyapacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Good to see everybody.
Haribo, Haribo, George
Haribo.
Prabhupada. Jai
Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gaura Bhaktivinoda.
Hey.
Jai.
Who's going to hang up first, right? Not me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you all very much
Thank
for
you. Thank you.
coming and speaking.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, all the speakers. So nice.
Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Damodar ki.
Yeah.
Jai.
Yeah.
Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki.
Jai.
Vishnu Jan Swami Maharaj ki.
Yeah.
Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki.
Yeah.
Jai Gopal ki.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Yeah.
Jai Haribo.